Shri Pradyut Bordoloi.
Chairman, sir, as I rise to speak on the amendments, I would like to put on record my appreciation to the Honorable Speaker of the Lok Sabha, because this is one of the rare bills that has been referred to the standing committee. Because consultation is a very much important part of democracy. But unfortunately, in the UPA regime, about 71% bills were referred to the standing committees for discussion. But that figure has come down to 11%. So this bill is one of that rare bill of 11% that was referred to the standing committee, and then standing committee also very decisively, they recommended a lot of amendments. But it is up to the House that whether these amendments would be accepted or not. Having said that, sir, we very fondly remember one former Prime Minister who really ushered in the era of conservation in this country. I would like to remind the House that it was 1966 when Srimati Indira Gandhi took over as the Prime Minister, and immediately she expressed concern about the conservation, because the swaths of prime forests were destroyed and it had been cleared for settling the partition refuges immediately after independence. Similarly, natural habitats, the prime forests, were recklessly destroyed for making ways for mines, for dams, for construction of roads and real estates. That was very worrisome. And wild animals were killed with anybody having a gun. There was like a Western atmosphere. And then trade in tiger skins and trophies were rampant. So much so, even in the midst of Delhi, there was a Chanakya market where tiger skins were readily available to be bought. So all these matters were made her very worried. And eventually, India hosted the first IUCN conference here in India in 1969. The International Union of Conservation. And International Union of Conservation expressly expressed the concern about the plight of the tigers and elephants, etc. And that was a time Mrs. Indira Gandhi very famously said in the conference that we do not need foreign exchange. We do need foreign exchange, but not at the cost of life and liberty of some of the most beautiful inhabitants of this continent. And that set the ball rolling, and eventually the task force was set up, and that paved way the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. And this act, despite of probably today's age, it is maybe little imperfect in many ways, but is essentially a very progressive law, because this is the law that actually banned hunting of wild animals, created protected wildlife habitats, allowing our wild treasures to grow, survive, and flourish. And this is the very act that created the parks and sanctuaries and reserves. This is the act that set up the National Board for Wildlife. This is the act subsequently when Project Tiger and Project Elephants were set up, and the wildlife managerial practices were ruled. So this is very important law, and I am very happy that these particular amendments are brought in. Some of the amendments are, of course, very necessary. The prominent among them are the prohibition of renewal of arms license within the 10-kilometer radius. That is very much needed. And also to regulate the international trade, the CITES trade, that is very important. I think this is welcome. And the surrender of wild animals and products, among other things, the regulation of invasive plants, then reorganization of CIDLs, and of course the other things. Those are very important. But having said all these, I would like to point out the fallacies and anomalies even in the CITES. We all know the CITES actually among 38,700 species of animals and wild animals and plants. The CITES organize and they regulate all the rules among the member countries. But there are also fallacies. I would like to point out, in Assam, we have a plant called agarwood. The botanical name is Aquilaria melacensis. Because of the climatic condition, because of the very conducive soil condition, the Assam agar has got a huge brand equity world over, especially in the Arab and the Middle East. But CITES has included that Assam agar, that in the list. As a result, sir, you would be surprised to know that Assam, this agarwood is growing abundantly in the homestead lands. It is not available in the reserve forest and wildlife areas. But this Assam agar is grown all over the places, at the backyard of the houses, the homestead lands. But the people and the state are not getting the legitimate and the legal remuneration because of that. And so you'd be surprised to know that Assam agar is being smuggled out, hoodwinking the system because of the CITES embargo. So it is very important that this kind of fallacies should be removed from the CITES, and I would request the Honorable Minister to look into this matter and arrange to remove the Assam agar from the list of the CITES. Similarly, there are other things like regulation of invasive species, which is very, very important because we have to protect the habitats. For example, Kaziranga National Park is known world over because the rhinoceros and other herbivores are dependent on the grassland. But in the tea industry surrounded the Kaziranga National Park, they at one point of time they introduced this mimosa plants because mimosa has got antibacterial qualities. But mimosa is very prolific, and this mimosa invasion has almost on the verge of killing the grasslands. So that is why the regulation of the invasive plants is a very important thing. If necessary, those invasive plants or weeds should be culled and eradicated and removed to protect our wildlife. And we are coming to a very sensitive subject called elephant. Of course, elephant is very much here. The standing committee also has referred, and standing committee has asked for a very careful balance between the traditions of our society and conservation. So there are about 16 states in our country who actually have habitat of elephants. And as per the Wildlife Institute of India data, that we have probably 28,000 to 31,000 elephants. But latest data is not available. That data is as old as 2012. I also note that your ministry asked different state governments to give the data because we have 30 elephant reserves. Unfortunately, those information are not available. So this information should be updated. We have to know that what is the exact number of elephants that we have in our country. And so, having said that, tradition and all, so elephants actually grow in a particular habitat. Elephants don't really grow in some other anti-friendly, non-friendly environment. But we have record that about 320 elephants were taken out of Assam with permission on record. But we do not know how many elephants have been taken out from Assam. And we are told these elephants are transported to various places, some temples in South India, and a large number of elephants have been taken to Jamnagar by a prominent industrialist of India.
Please conclude. Actually, you have three other speakers.
But what I'm basically trying to say, these elephants grow in a particular environment. That scientific study has to be made whether the elephants can survive in a non-friendly, anti-friendly, in atmosphere. And that is very important, that human-elephant conflict that we have, that is on the rise day by day. A large number of human and cattle and crop loss has been recorded because of the shrinkage of the natural habitat of the elephant, because of the biotic pressure, because of the fragmentation of the reserve forest, the shrinkage. But that elephant habitat has to be protected, and that is where the traditional knowledge also has to be combined. So you would be very surprised to know that elephant command, the domesticated elephant, is a part of our tradition, and that tradition was very good, and that elephant command, even vocabulary, traveled to Thailand and Cambodia and Southeast Asian, same language. And in the 18th century, the elephant treatise was compiled in Assam. It's called Hasti Vidyar Nava by Sukumar Borkait in the 18th century. And it precisely gives how the elephant should be preserved, how elephants' habitats should be protected. But in that entire thing, we also had two domesticated elephant measures like Bela Shikar and Kheda Shikar. Shikar is a misnomer. Shikar doesn't mean that elephant hunting takes place, but it actually creates a data. It also tries to minimize the human-elephant conflict. But that has been eradicated, that has been uplifted. So that is why it is very important that traditional knowledge should be combined with the present-day managerial practices of wildlife. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Shri Kirti Vardhan Singh.